Welcome to my tutorial for Kung Fu Master for the Commodore 64. This is a pretty good port for the Commodore, considering that a lot of Commodore games are pretty fucking bad. This is actually a pretty good port, but I say pretty good because it does have a lot of issues. The hit detection can be very strange. The enemies will easily latch onto you and your hits will easily just go through the enemy. So you do, like you just saw there, you can see the hits clearly connected, but it doesn't really matter, because the game will just bypass that. But this is the easiest of the Kung Fu ports that I've played. The arcade was the hardest version. The NES one was very easy, taking me about 12 minutes to beat when I went through it recently. The arcade version, I believe, took possibly a few hours to beat. I remember that being pretty difficult. This one took maybe an hour and 38 minutes or an hour and 28 minutes, somewhere around there. And the main issue was because the last boss is fucking ridiculous with the controls. See, in this game, for this part, just walk straight through. The first level doesn't really need an explanation, but the second stage, you want to just walk straight. You may take one hit, but you can just take the one hit, and then when you get to the boomerang guy, jump over the midgets and the snake when it reaches you. And, just get all the other enemies off you if they cling on to you, obviously. But you should have enough health left to take care of the boomerang guy. All you really got to do is maybe, leg sweep him until he dies, pretty much. Maybe one kick to the head, then just, use leg sweeps. You don't want to be too close to any of the enemies or the hits won't connect. So you have to have a little bit of distance. The biggest issue with the controls is that if you want to switch from a punch to a kick, you have to press spacebar. Problem is, it rarely ever works. For me, it only works when it wants to, so that's a big problem. And aside from that, I was using a controller to play the game, so it's very inconvenient to try to reach for the spacebar when I'm, playing the game with the controller, because I have the keyboard off to the side. Now, maybe there's a better way to do that. But on my current setup, I don't really play games with the keyboard. I use the keyboard to select the games that I want to load on the emulation setup, but I don't really have it set up for gameplay too much, unless it's a game where you use a mouse, like a point and click type of game is fine. I have a mouse pad on the wireless keyboard that I use. For that guy, all you have to do is sweep kick him. Just make sure you stay out of range. You want to be far away and just sweep kick that boss. Very easy if you do that. The level is very easy as well. You just got to kill a few enemies and just make your way to the left. It's quite easy. Now, this is one of the harder stages, but I usually just take a lot of the hits, as you'll see. Because the hit detection is so bad, I just take some hits from these wasps. And when you get to the end, though, you want to make sure you switched to the punch attack by hitting spacebar. Preferably at the very beginning of this stage, you want to hit spacebar so that you're ready to punch. You don't want to try to switch when you get to the boss. See, I'm punching the guys. That's because I switched to it in the beginning of this stage. And then all you have to do is get within range and then crouch punch the boss, which is the shorter guy, until he's dead. Once he dies, just go to the right. And you should have enough health to pull that off. Even if you get hit by the wasp, you can just walk right and pretty much ignore the wasp and just absorb the damage and finish him off that way. But now this next part is going to be the hardest part of the game, and it's a huge pain in the ass. For this fifth and final stage, I recommend making a save state at the very beginning of the stage. You're probably not going to be able to make a save state at the actual boss unless you have somebody else dealing with the keyboard, because you can't pause the game, as far as I know. So, while you're trying to make a save state, you're probably going to get swarmed and killed by enemies like I did. I tried to make a save state right on the boss so I could practice the boss, but I ended up just losing a life trying to do that. So, unless you have somebody helping you with that, it's going to be hard to do. So make a save state at the beginning of this stage. It's an easy enough stage. You want to learn it anyway, so it's not a big deal if you have to repeat the stage. But the boss is just a huge fucking pain in the ass because of the really bad hit detection, and the way the boss dodges really doesn't make any logical sense. So with the boss, you want to mix punches and kicks, and eventually certain hits will get through, but I cannot give a ton of advice aside from what you see me doing here with crouching and mixing up standing attacks with crouching, maybe an occasional jump kick. Just keep mixing it up. This was a very good run of the boss. Normally, you can be hitting him for a long fucking time and he doesn't take any damage. It's ridiculous. You're not going to see that as much in the video, but you get a little bit of an idea and a taste of it. But see, you can see it makes no logical sense when it connects. I can't make sense of it. So Another trick is if you hold spacebar while mashing the button on the controller, or if you're playing on a keyboard, it's probably might be easier to play this game on a keyboard because of the spacebar bullshit. But either way, if you hold down the spacebar and mash the fire button, you will alternate between punches and kicks. I guess I died here. I must have left that in accidentally. Or maybe I just showed my full playthrough. That's probably what this is. But, yeah, so if you hold the spacebar down and just mash the fire button, you'll alternate between punches and kicks automatically. So it'll do punch, kick, punch, kick, punch, kick, punch, kick, etc. It'll keep doing that if you hold the spacebar. I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be, but that's how it worked for me. It was odd. Now, if you want to switch to just punches or kicks and just purely do one move or the other, you can hit the spacebar once, I believe, to switch. But it was very inconsistent for me when I tried to switch moves. You can see what a pain in the ass this guy is. He's easy not to take damage on because if you keep attacking, it pushes him back. He probably won't hit you much. It's when you try to retreat and get a little space between you and him that he will easily hit you. So that time I did break through a lot faster, as you saw. But I don't have any great tips. It's a completely bullshit fight. And that's the only reason the game took me over an hour and a half to beat. I probably would have beaten this in a few minutes. I got to the last boss very quickly in this game. But for that reason, it took me well over an hour and a half to beat because of that bullshit boss. What I recommend doing with save states is practicing that stage until you're able to break through that boss at least a few times and beat him in practice. If you can beat him in practice a few times, then at least you have an idea of what you're going to need to do when you get to him in the real run. Luckily, it is easy to get back to him, but it still takes time, and it's a waste of time to try to keep getting to him and try to get lucky. You want to make sure you can at least break through 2 or 3 times just to make sure that you have a chance at beating it when you get back to it. So that's my recommendation, because there's no continues in the game. You do earn 1-ups on points occasionally, and your 1-ups are shown beneath the floors with those little head icons, but there are no continues. So you want to make sure you have it down decently enough. Now at this point, I'm just fucking around with the second loop. I'm showing a little bit of that. I believe I didn't edit this run, so I think this is my full whatever happened on the run. I think I didn't lose a life until the final stage, as you saw. And then, of course, I didn't make it very far into the second loop. But I didn't really give a shit too much. I was just kind of fucking around because, I wasn't trying to do bad, but I wasn't super focused because I just wanted to beat the game. I was pretty irritated with the game. I really wanted to shut the fucking game off after beating the 5th boss because it was starting to piss me off. It's just so fucking inconsistent with the final boss. It's really, really irritating. But you got to expect that with a lot of Commodore games if you're going to try to complete them. Some of them are ridiculous. This is not nearly as bad as some of the other games like Hunchback, which was a very bullshitty game. Took around 4 hours to beat. And I made a tutorial on that as well on the channel. I'm just now starting to explore Commodore a little bit. I've only beaten about maybe 17 games on the machine, on emulation, so I'm just starting to get into it. And some of the games are pretty damn good. And others, are okay. Most of them are shit, in my experience. But this is pretty solid, but I think the last boss kind of ruins this port. I think it's enjoyable up until the last boss. It's pretty decent. It's not great, though, because having to hit spacebar to switch between punches and kicks is pretty damn shitty. And the fact that it only works sometimes. It also doesn't help that the keyboard I'm using was really intended to be used to switch games and to change settings on the emulators and stuff like that. Not really for gameplay. So the problem with that keyboard is that it goes into rest mode, or sometimes it just doesn't register button inputs. So you'll have to hit the same button again to get it to register. And of course, when you're trying to switch moves and you have no visual indicators of if the move switched or not, double tapping may, not have the intended, use that you wanted it to have. You don't always know what's going on with that. So, it did make things a little bit more worse, but it also seemed that the game was just not very responsive at all with switching moves. Now, it could be because I don't know exactly how the game does it. It may be maybe you have to hold spacebar for a while to switch consistently, but I'm just really not sure if I was doing something wrong, but I think it could have been handled a hell of a lot better. What they should have done is if you wanted to, do a punch or a kick, maybe have the punches set to diagonals or something like that, Like the sweeping kick could have easily just been a diagonal input, like down diagonal left or down diagonally right with fire button, something like that. I think could have worked. Unfortunately, the Commodore mostly only has one button on all the games, so it is limited, but I think they could have handled it better. So yeah, the problem with the last boss is that it seems to expect you to switch between punches and kicks frequently for the hits to land. Now, sometimes I would stick with only punches and get a lot of damage in, but it seemed if I didn't switch to, a kick or something, I wouldn't be able to get the next hit in. And you're not seeing it in the video, but a lot of times what happened to me was the fucking timer actually ran out while I was fighting the final boss because it took so long to land hits. So that's what you're not seeing in the video, and that's why it took so long. If you play it, I think you'll understand why I had to wrestle with it and why it's a pain in the ass. But if you play it, you'll see what it's like when the hits don't go through, and there's really no logical reason why the hits are not connecting. It really doesn't make any sense. You kind of just got to grind through it. But you still want to practice it. Even though I beat it, I still don't have a good idea of why it worked, but I know how to get through it now. You know what I mean? Because I know that if I grind the methods that I used in practice, I know eventually I will break through, and I have a good chance of beating it eventually. And it didn't take me much longer to beat it after practicing. So I do recommend use that save state practice on the emulator and practice that last stage. Ideally, if you could, you would want to make a save state right on the last boss so you don't have to keep doing the stage over, but I was unable to successfully do that by myself. You really need somebody else holding the keyboard and maybe saving for you at that point. Then you could do it. But, I don't know, I found it too difficult while holding the controller, trying to save state on the keyboard because there's unfortunately not a quick hotkey for Commodore 64 where you can press one button to save and load states. That would have made things a little bit more doable with saving. But yeah, let me know if that helps, and thanks for watching.